Welcome to Hack Your Health with Dr. Nat, a transformative live stream TV show that brings wellness within everyone's reach. Each episode, featuring expert guests, delves into crucial topics like hormonal health, effective detoxification, and stress management through nervous system optimization. Gain practical insights into nutrition, supplementation, efficient workouts, and biohacking tools to enhance mental and physical health. So now, please welcome the host of Hack Your Health, Dr. Nat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hack Your Health with Dr. Nat. I am your host, Dr. Nathalie Beauchamp. My aim for the show is to bring you amazing guests and interesting topics that are really important to your health. And today we are going to talk about the microbiome and how to harness our ecology for better digestion, energy, and even mood. And to do that, my guest today is Kristina Mitts, and I'm going to read her short bio here. Kristina is a registered nutritionist with experience working in the field of functional and integrative medicine and microbiome restoration. She has been mentored by integrative MD Dr. Bill Code since 2018, has trained in the UK in microbiome restoration, and continues all the time to up-level her functional medicine training. She had personal health challenge, which she'll discuss with us, but those challenges led her to create her personal company, Mind, Mood, and Microbes, as well as she is a co-founder of the clinic Vancouver Island IV, in the effort to make testing and root cause healthcare accessible to Canadians. So Kristina loves to teach her clients how to better their microbiota and by default their brain health. Also reducing brain fog, histamine tolerance, bloating, and chronic autoimmune issues. So welcome to the show, Kristina.
Thank you so much for having me. That was a great intro.
Yes, and I'm excited to dive deeper because I know I consider myself fairly knowledgeable about the gut, but I think you've been trained by an amazing mentor who is really pushing all of the newer things when it comes to the microbiome. So I know I'm going to learn a few things. As I mentioned in my introduction, you had your own personal health challenges, and it's often the case, for a lot of us who jump feet first into health care and trying to help others. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that with us, Kristina, that'd be great.
Definitely. So if I'm honest with myself, I do feel like I've had issues as far back as my teenage years, but things really got to the point of no return about the time of me being 24 or 25. And I, at that time, started experiencing severe gut issues. I had many, many food intolerances. And what would happen is this would manifest as insomnia, and I would go weeks at a time, sleeping only 1 to 2 hours a night because I'd reacted to a food or a chemical or something in my environment, or maybe even something in my body. And along with that insomnia was anxiety, brain fog, bloating, all of the sort of like typical gut manifestations that you can picture. And I hit dead ends when I tried to go through the conventional medical system. My family doctor basically wrote me off and said, I don't really feel comfortable running the labs that you're requesting, because I had looked into that point and had suspected some things and had requested some specific labs. But she did not want to run those labs. And so at that time, I just felt, I'm just knocking on the wrong door, so I'll try something else. And I had been learning about functional medicine at that point, and there was one or two functional medicine doctors in my province at that point. So I sought them out, and sure enough, through looking at labs, we found that I had an autoimmune condition and multiple infections, and that allowed me to get started on improving my health. But ultimately I would have to go back to school and learn how to improve my health on my own to get to where I am today, because it ended up being very complex.
Yeah, I mean, the gut is, like you said, so complex. And this is something that, obviously functional medicine practitioner look at, and naturopath have looked at for, for years, that, they said, look to the gut for the cause of a lot of those issues. So let's dig deeper into the topic. So let's talk about the microbiome, what it is, and then we'll lead on to digestion, because the purpose of the show obviously is for people to gain some insight, which I know we will, but it's also, feel free to integrate some tips as we go along, because we want to make this practical for people. And I always love, even just today, a patient was telling me that they listened to the second last show, and she's like, I started implementing the stuff right away and taking notes. So let's talk about that microbiome. I think more and more people are aware of the word now, at least compared to years ago. But let's dig deeper onto this.
Absolutely. So let's start with, what is the microbiome? The microbiome is our own internal ecosystem composed of bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other organisms. When I say ecosystem because the microbes are constantly in communication with each other. They're sensing their environment. They're in communication with other systems in the body, such as the brain, the nervous system, the liver, and our detox organs. So if we're thinking about improving the microbiome, we're thinking about the microbes and the things that they produce, and how can we sort of upregulate the production of, the growth of microbes that are beneficial and that are going to produce things, substances, compounds that are going to be helpful for us in the long run. So scientists have been super busy over the last 10 years. Technology keeps getting better and better. So they've been actually able to map the microbiome signature for so many different conditions. So they're looking at signatures for conditions like multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, Crohn's, colitis, IBS, PMDD, PMS, you name it, there is a microbial signature to map it. So the research is super interesting.
Wow, it is. And like you said, it's always evolving. So let's talk about digestion itself, because, I myself have done, further study with functional medicine, and one of our mentors always, talk about north to south, meaning from the mouth right to the other end, and all the processes that happen, which need to happen for us to digest properly. So let's explore digestion and what normal digestion is, and I guess what abnormal digestion is as well.
Yeah, so we can start with what normal and abnormal digestion does look like. The first place I always start with clients is talking about bowel movement quality. So you should be having 1 to 2 bowel movements per day, and they should look like smooth bananas. If you are experiencing bloating, a little bit of bloating and water retention is normal, especially in women who are still cycling. But if that bloating is chronic and you start to notice that it's becoming more moderate to severe and it's uncomfortable, then that's not so normal, and that's a sign that you've got something to work on. I also talk to clients about looking at the color and then noticing the smell of their bowel movements as well, because those can provide clues as to what might be going on. So say, for example, your bowel movements look like they're clay colored, they look like they're greasy, or they're floating. That can be a sign that you aren't producing enough bile, or that there might be something going on with the gallbladder. If your bowel movements smell sulfurous, if they smell like a barnyard, if they smell toxic, that's also a sign that something is off, and that can be indicative of there being overgrowth of undesirable microbes. If you are feeling like you are intolerant to carbohydrates and to prebiotic fiber, that can be a sign that something is off as well. And if someone presents with those sort of symptoms, then we start thinking about something called SIBO, which stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And 80%, approximately 80% of IBS cases actually end up being SIBO. So if this is you, if you feel like you're intolerant to carbohydrates, if they promote bloating, gas, distension, discomfort for you, then definitely talk to your healthcare provider about SIBO. If you are trying to optimize your digestion, I think north to south is a really good entry point into that, because we really can start at the very top and then work our way down. The oral microbiome is a good place to start. And so we have microbial communities within our mouth as well. So taking care of our oral health can be really important, because there can be a trickle down effect. Say you have many cavities, or you have an infected root canal, that can trickle down to the rest of your gut and microbiome, and it can impact you systemically as well. The next thing I would think about is stomach acid production, production of enzymes, production of bile. So this is what I call digestive fire. So are we producing enough of the substances that actually allow us to properly break down our food so that there isn't fodder left over for microbes to overgrow in the wrong places, which would lead us back to SIBO. Chewing as well, starting at the very top. So typically we're instructing our clients to chew 30 to 40 times per bite to make sure that you're actually breaking down the food properly. And then eating while seated instead of being on the run, and eating while you're in a low stress environment can be really helpful as well. Eating a wide variety of foods is important for the microbiome. So one of the things that almost everyone in the microbiome research world can agree upon is that diversity is really important for the microbiome. And the fastest way to increase microbial diversity is through eating a wide range of foods. The research shows if you can eat a minimum of 30 to 40 foods per week, so different foods, this could be herbs, spices, vegetables, fruits, legumes, different varietals of things, that all adds up pretty quickly. And you'll get past 30 to 40 foods in no time if you're eating, quite a few different herbs and spices as well. And then that's going to protect you from more severe infections like C. difficile. Choosing different colors can be helpful, and this is a good way to get the kids involved. If you can have a color calendar where, say, Monday is purple day and you eat eggplant or grapes, Tuesday is red day and you eat red bell peppers or tomatoes. That way you're getting different, what we call polyphenols, which are plant compounds that are food for your beneficial microbes. You'll get different polyphenols with every color of food that you eat. So the color calendar is a good way to get the kids involved.
I love that. Actually, I never thought of it per day, but it's kids are probably looking forward to that day or whatever is their favorite color. I love it.
Yeah, and it gives them autonomy over like even grocery shopping as well. Get them excited about being involved in grocery shopping and cooking and the rest of it. You'll also want to choose whole foods over processed foods. So with whole foods, we're getting far more micronutrients, we're getting the polyphenols, we're getting the prebiotics, where in processed foods, you're not getting so much of that, and you're unlikely to be feeding very many beneficial microbes. And then your physical activity ends up impacting your microbiome as well, and your social habits, as well as whether or not you have pets or livestock, those can all impact your microbiome as well.
Yeah. I mean, you unpacked a lot of great things here. So let's start back at the mouth, because I think people don't realize that we do have a microbiome in our mouth. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about mouthwash and how not good it is for us to use that. So I'm sure this is a conversation you probably have with your own clients, right? To those habits that we think we were brought up, that it was great. You want to have fresh breath, use the commercial mouthwash, and then you're really affecting your microbiome. Do you have a recipe that you like to do for your own personal one?
I do. I actually have a recipe that I share with clients. So the recipe involves green tea as a base. Green tea is great for the oral microbes. Then you would be adding in something like xylitol, which is antifungal, so also helpful for the oral microbiome. And then you might add in 1 to 2 drops of an essential oil. So say you wanted spearmint or something like that, that would be a good way to flavor it. That's kind of the gist of it. There is more to it than that, depending on how far you want to go with it, because you can add things that are good for remineralization or good for the gums, but that's kind of the base of the recipe.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And another thing that we probably both see often is that people are having acid reflux and GERD, and they're thinking, oftentimes they'll get even on the proton pump inhibitor and so forth. And yet, on the contrary, they're not producing enough acid to break down the food properly. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Exactly. So, one of the first things you can do if you notice that you aren't absorbing nutrition that is dependent on stomach acid, so say you have low calcium levels, low B12, or low protein or low iron, that would be a sign to investigate whether or not you have low stomach acid. There's different ways of doing this. A gastroenterologist can do this through their own testing, but that might not be accessible to everyone. So, we give clients a DIY test to just do at home with baking soda. So first thing in the morning, you would take a half teaspoon of fresh baking soda with a couple ounces of water, drink that down, time how long it takes you to burp. If it takes longer than 3 to 4 minutes, then you're looking more along the lines of having low stomach acid. But if you burp really quickly within 1 to 2 minutes, your stomach acid is optimal.
Yeah, there's betaine HCl tablet that people can do similarly, right, to test that. So
Exactly.
this is great information before people kind of jump on the regular medication bandwagon. And I love the idea of eating 30 different foods per week, because we are creatures of habit, myself included. And sometimes I even push myself to go to a different grocery store that is completely different, which I'll have to slow down and pay a little bit more attention, because we're grabbing the same foods often. So color the rainbow, and then making sure that we have a variety is super, super important. So let's go now a little bit more into the gut and brain axis. As a chiropractor, the brain is, something that I'm fascinated by, the spine and the nervous system, and that gut-brain axis and the vagus nerve. So let's have you expand a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so the gut, the brain, and the nervous system are in constant communication. And if you've ever wondered if your microbiome plays a role in your mood, in your emotional stability, in your threshold for stress, in your predisposition to conditions like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, the short answer is, well, yes. So when we talked about the microbiome being in communication with other systems in the body, it does this mainly via the end products that microbes produce. So there's a slide for this
Yeah,
where we're looking at
let's bring let's bring the visual up. Thank you.
yeah, so we've got the central nervous system communicating with the gut microbiome and also the immune system. So we've got this three-way communication that's happening. And the microbiome is communicating to the gut and nervous system via producing neurotransmitters largely. So it is able to produce GABA, serotonin, dopamine, noradrenaline in order to communicate with the nervous system and the brain. And of course, GABA is going to be along the lines of being calming and helpful, whereas something like adrenaline is going to be more stimulating. You can see that the microbiome is going to be stimulating the immune system in a variety of ways, and that's going to have differing impacts on the brain and the nervous system. And then the gut can also produce things that are not going to be so great for the nervous system. So one good example of this is lipopolysaccharide, and this is relevant for the oral microbiome as well. So there's a ton of research that's come out talking about this endotoxin that's part of the wall of some of our bacteria. So lipopolysaccharide, the most potent endotoxin that our microbes make, it can be released by our oral microbes. It can be released by our gut microbes. And this stimulates systemic, so body-wide inflammation, including inflammation in the brain. And when you're looking at research or articles and they're talking about the connection between the microbiome and cardiovascular disease, this is the main connection, is this lipopolysaccharide compound. So yeah, if you remember anything, remember lipopolysaccharide, toxic. So this is why we take care of our oral microbiome and our gut microbiome. The gut microbiome can also promote resorption of toxins and hormones. So it could potentially promote estrogen dominance, for example, which isn't going to feel so great. and then could also produce other toxins as well. So yeah, I think that's it for that slide.
Perfect. And then you're talking also, I mean, it's great. And you make such a good point with the iron and B12, because a lot of people have those tested, they're low, and they are, taking them in, but they're not absorbing it. So I think having the proper digestion for the proper absorption and looking at all of those aspects with the gut and brain activity is super important as well. So you have another slide that it looks a little bit complex, but let's see if we can simplify it a little bit.
Yeah, so this slide is just demonstrating what sort of compounds are going to be produced in a healthy microbiome, a healthy, diverse microbiome, versus a more so dysbiotic or imbalanced microbiome, and what sort of microbes you might see that are part of those signatures. So if you have a healthy microbiome, you're going to see higher levels of bifidobacterium and lactobacillus. You're going to have microbes that are able to degrade oxalates, which are other plant chemicals and compounds. And then you're going to have better degradation of certain chemicals like acetaldehyde. Whereas if you're in the imbalanced side of things, which we call dysbiosis, you're going to see higher levels of potentially candida or other yeast, high aspergillus, which is another yeast, high levels of streptococcus and staphylococcus, potentially higher levels of E. coli and Klebsiella. And then you're going to see more production of toxins such as acetaldehyde.
Excellent. So let's go back here to our main screen here. So this is fascinating and how complex it is. And I know that, leading from the brain, some statistic on cognitive decline. So I looked online as of recent, someone in the world developed dementia every 3 seconds. There are over 55 million people worldwide living with dementia in 2020. And this number will almost double every 20 years, reaching sadly 78 million in 2030 and 139 million in 2050. So much of this increase will also happen in the developing country. And this is personally a topic that's dear to my heart because my mom passed away from Alzheimer's. So, I mean, to see her cognitive decline was heartbreaking, and the stats are pretty staggering. So let's talk about this and the impact.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things that are going to predispose someone to cognitive decline and dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and the microbiome is part of that. I think the third slide is a good demonstration of just how involved the microbiome can be. So yeah, in the third slide,
bring that visual.
Yeah. In the third slide, so I took this from a study where researchers had taken stool samples, and they'd actually implanted stool from young, healthy mice or rats into aged mice, and then vice versa. They took stool samples from the aged mice and implanted them into the young mice. And what we get when we implant stool samples from aged mice into young mice is we get impaired cognitive behavior. So definitely there's this pattern of, along with aging, the microbiome ages as well. And if we age in an unhealthy way and we have an unhealthy microbiome, that's going to predispose us to cognitive decline. And so what they found specifically when they were looking at the lab markers in these studies is that there's an increased level of inflammatory cytokines and oxidative stress that went along with the stool samples that were implanted into the young mice from the aged mice. And so this is indicating that there is greater levels of inflammation and the oxidative stress that may underlie gut-related cognitive decline.
Yeah, this is a pretty popular study in the functional medicine world showing exactly what you just said. So it's fascinating. So let's now talk about Parkinson, because there's also a correlation with that. So if you don't mind, we'll remove the visual now. Perfect. So yeah, let's talk about the impact of the gut on Parkinson.
So one sign I tell everyone look out for in regards to Parkinson's is chronic constipation, because the research does show that in those who develop Parkinson's, constipation sometimes appears as much as 10 years ahead of having the actual diagnosis. And we can look at the microbial signature now for Parkinson's, which also involves elevated levels of hydrogen sulfide producing microbes. So hydrogen sulfide being a gas that can interrupt the motility and transit time. So transit time being the length of time that it takes for food to travel all the way through your intestines. And hydrogen sulfide can result in constipation.
Talking about that transit time, is that a homework that you sometimes give to your patient to measure their transit time? And if you do, please tell our viewers what we mean by this.
Absolutely. Yes. So one of the at-home exercises we give clients is the transit time test. And to do the test, what they would do is they're going to take a spoonful of sesame seeds and they're going to swallow them without chewing. And they're going to time how long it takes for the sesame seeds to show up in their stool. And so we're looking for a transit time of about 18 to 22 hours. That's going to be optimal. If it's faster than that, so say 12 hours, that might be a little bit too fast, and it could be a sign that they don't have enough time to absorb the nutrition from their food. Whereas if it's longer than that, then we know that there's likely hyperfermentation of their food going on, and potential resorption of toxins.
Yeah, it's something, and we started the show talking about poop and color and smell and so forth, and I think it's important that we discuss how, I mean, as a doctor, I talk about that all the time and, quite openly with my patients, but I think it is something that we should not be shy to talk about. We should not, just ignore it, and that we really should pay attention, because a lot of people are constipated, and what it means is they may not have a bowel movement for 3 or 4 days, and that's their normal. Well, there is no such a thing as that being normal, because you mentioned earlier too that immune system. So a lot of people that don't have a healthy microbiome will be the people that seem to get sick all the time and come down with this flu and this cold and so forth, because I can't remember the exact stat, but 75% or 80% of our immune system is within the gut. So it's truly important to pay attention to that. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about tips and strategies that people can really implement, and we're going to talk about probiotics. So probiotics and postbiotic, because I think, again, people are more aware of them now, but let's understand what they are and how they can help us. So we'll be right back.
In today's world, the flood of health information feels endless. But amidst the noise, two experts with over 50 years of combined clinical experience come together to help you with Smart Cuts, biohack your health span, cutting-edge protocols for greater energy and performance. Dr. Paul Sly, a beacon for athletes, weekend warriors, and those seeking to elevate their potential. And Dr. Nathalie Beauchamp, renowned for empowering individuals in their health journeys. Together, they've produced the book, Smart Cuts, Biohack Your Health Span, a protocol-based treasure trove packed with actionable steps. Journey through 5 transformative sections. Dive into sleep, hydration, movement, brain health, and even the secrets of longevity. Guided by their expert hands, unleash the best version of yourself. With over half a century of clinical wisdom and innovative protocols, reclaim your health and redefine your limits. Are you ready to embark on this transformative journey? Smart Cuts, available now.
And we are back to Hack Your Health with Dr. Nat with my guest, Kristina Mitts. And we're talking about the gut, the microbiome. So we've covered kind of the logistic of the gut. Now we want to dig into practical tips. I mean, we talked about eating the color of the rainbow. We talked about the diversity and the variety of the foods that we eat. So give us some more insight, Kristina, on what you're teaching your patient and coaching your patient with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always trying to bridge research and real life application of things. So, on the research side of things, if you look at the diet with the most evidence for beneficial impact on the microbiome and via impact on the microbiome, impact on our longevity and health, that would be the Mediterranean diet. And the reason being for that is that the Mediterranean diet does contain quite a bit of fiber. It has a wide variety of those colorful polyphenols. So, if we think about the olives and the tomatoes and the different fruits and vegetables that are in the Mediterranean diet, that's a big part of the reason why. And that, along with beneficial or healthy fats as well. So our microbiome does enjoy healthy fats, which would be present in many of the nuts and the seeds and the olives and the olive oil that come along with a Mediterranean diet. But taking that to make it accessible to Canadians and North Americans, for example, even if you can just increase your fiber intake, not everyone's going to be able to do that right away. Sometimes it's a matter of training your microbiome, and other times it's a matter of, okay, this person has SIBO and we actually need to get rid of that before they're going to tolerate an increase in fiber. But we're aiming for a minimum of 25 grams of fiber per day. That's what we're aiming for to maintain and to grow a resilient and diverse microbiome. Eating the rainbow, so I mentioned that already. Resistance and exercise training can be helpful for the microbiome as well. So research does show that athletes have their own special species of microbes that non-athletes don't have. So you actually develop a more diverse microbiome through being athletic. Things like even cold therapy and sauna impact the microbiome in positive ways. So I was looking at a study recently where they were looking at the effects of infrared sauna on the microbiome, and it actually reduces problematic microbes like H. pylori, which is amazing. You want to incorporate probiotic foods where you can. So that's going to be your yogurt, your natto, your sauerkraut, your kimchi, your kefir. And I always say there's a probiotic strain for everyone. So I tend to work with very sensitive clients who they come to me and they say, oh, I've tried this probiotic food and I've tried that probiotic and it made me feel horrible. Well, that just means they haven't found the right probiotic species or strain for them. And you can customize, you can make your own yogurt using strains that do work for you, or we can be even more selective and go with single or dual strain probiotics that are going to have more specific impact on the person's symptoms. And don't be afraid to try new foods. Again, coming back to the diversity angle, the wider the variety of foods that you eat, the better for your microbiome.
Cool. So probiotics, that is, again, kind of prebiotics, basically, so people understand, are the substances that our microbiome needs as well, right? So it's fuel for them. Then we got the probiotics, which are strains of different microbes to cultivate and keep your gut healthy. And then we've got the postbiotics. So can you explain what they are and how people can probably help increase those as well?
Exactly. So we've talked about prebiotics, which is going to be the fiber, the polyphenols, the things that actually fuel the growth and feed your microbiome and your microbes. We have probiotics, which are beneficial microbes. So a microbe that has to have a beneficial effect on the human host. That's actually more or less the definition of probiotic. And then postbiotic is something that the microbes make. And so they might be making short chain fatty acids like butyrate, acetate, or propionate. They might be making neurotransmitters, or they might be making other types of compounds. When it comes to picking probiotics, say you're picking a probiotic supplement product, we want to match the strain to the health condition or the symptom that the person is looking to work on. So the strain is going to be indicated by this letter number combination that comes after the species name. So for example, Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG is a very common probiotic strain. We see it in a lot of different products, and so the strain being indicated by that GG. If I were working with someone who was working on constipation, I would be looking at strains like E. coli Nissle, which is in a product called Mutaflor, and it's been demonstrated to be helpful specifically in cases of chronic constipation. There's another probiotic strain that I like as well for constipation, and this one is the Bifidobacterium lactis HN019, and it also works really well for constipation. If we're thinking back to brain health and cognitive decline, I think more about strains within the Bacillus coagulans species. There's actually a couple different strains within that species that have been demonstrated to be beneficial when it comes to reducing or preventing cognitive decline.
Oh, that's fascinating. Now, all these numbers can seem a little bit confusing, but that's why when people have issues like this, we consult experts like you so we can be guided, because otherwise people would know. What about probiotics for women that have chronic bladder infection and yeast infection? Would you have one like the Saccharomyces boulardii? Is that one that you often suggest?
Actually, the Lactobacillus reuteri D, I'm not going to remember the number, but I remember it's Lactobacillus reuteri DSM 17938 or something like that.
Okay.
And it's in a couple different products. So it's in BioGaia's products, and it's also in a few of the Metagenics products.
Okay, so there is something to be given for that as well. So let's talk a little bit about testing, because a lot of time the traditional system, as you encounter way back, that the test didn't, they didn't want to run the test. So there is an entire side of functional medicine that encompasses testing, that it is hormone testing like saliva, dry blood, or regular blood, and also with the gut. So if you don't mind telling our viewer a little bit more about those tests and the information that you can gather from those tests, because it's pretty amazing, the information that these tests can give us.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the difference between the testing that you're getting from your doctor, if they even run testing, versus what you would get through one of these types of tests. So through your doctor or through the hospitals here, typically they're doing culture-based testing, which is where you take a sample of your stool and then you culture it to see what microbes grow. When they do that, it is exposed to air, which means that the microbes that are intolerant to air, which we call anaerobic, they die and they're not detected in that type of testing. But the majority of the microbes within our microbiome are actually anaerobic. So it doesn't make a ton of sense. When it comes to this other type of testing, so it's PCR testing, and there's a few different types of tests within the category of PCR testing. But what we're getting is a huge array of microbes that come back on the test. And so instead of being specific to like a parasite or E. coli or whatever it is that they're looking for on the culture-based testing, we get everything. And so we get the context for your microbiome. We get to see what is overgrown, what's undergrown, what are the levels of your different beneficial microbes, what are the levels of the commensal microbes looking at. Sometimes you get to see what they're doing as well. And I think this is going to be where the future of testing goes to, is combining the stool testing with testing for the many different metabolites of microbes. But that's a bit of a longer tangent. But so far what we get on these tests, we get to see the different levels of microbes. Sometimes we get to see some of the things that they produce, like the short chain fatty acids that I mentioned, which are the main way that microbes communicate health to us. So we might want to look at butyrate to see how anti-inflammatory is your microbiome, acetate, because acetate has a lot to do with our weight and hormone regulation. It might show us certain toxins that are being produced by the microbiome to warn us that certain groups of microbes need to be reduced, and so on.
Yeah. So I remember, I kind of wish I had put that as a fourth slide, actually. I did I believe it was a Genova GI map that I got done a few months ago. And I love how they're making those tests easier for people to read, kind of saying, okay, let's look at your inflammation. Let's look at potential like infection and so forth. So they're making it more and more practical that people can really, really understand what is going on in their gut. Now, it is not an inexpensive test. It is several $100s, but for the people listening that have some gut issue that are not getting answered, this is something that you can do with someone like Kristina, a functional medicine practitioner, to look at your gut and truly see. And sometimes it will pick up some infection, some parasites. So this way you can be really specific to address the dysbiosis with increasing some probiotics, removing or killing some of the microbes that are not healthy for the gut. So it is a test that I find very, very telling. And, you can change your diet, integrate all of the stuff that we talked about, and then test again and see, because it's often, I find people are excited to make the lifestyle changes, but if things are not measured prior and not measured after, they might say, yeah, I feel a bit better, but how do I know my gut microbiome is back to optimal health? How do I know that whatever parasite I might have had, my regimen that I did, through, again, like someone like you, a functional medicine practitioner or a naturopath, how do we know? So I'm a big fan of testing and monitoring. And let's face it, knowing the importance of our gut with our brain, with cognitive decline, with our immune system, I think it's really worth it for us to get measured. I'm not saying to do it, every 6 months, but this is to me, a yearly test that we should do to look at what's going on. I'm kind of sure that you agree with me, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I run my own every 3 to 4 months. So
there we go. So, you pay attention to it. So, so let's talk a little bit more. You talked about that study with the mice, and we talked about, well, in the study, it talked about fecal transplant. And this is where people go, what are they talking about? And there's tons of research, and we don't need to get down to the weeds on it, but this is actually a thing. And I think Dr. Code, who you studied under, has done a lot of work with that. So share with the audience why sometimes fecal transplant might be the solution for people, and what the process is all about.
Right. So a fecal transplant is where you take microbes from a healthy person and then implant them into someone with a health condition. Now, within North America, the condition that fecal transplants are indicated for is C. difficile, which is a life-threatening infection. So yeah, definitely very beneficial for C. difficile, like 99% cure rate with one implantation, which is amazing. There is a lot of other research being done looking at other health conditions and how fecal transplants might be beneficial in other health conditions. So conditions like colitis and Crohn's seem to respond quite positively to fecal transplants. And we've worked with other conditions using the fecal transplants as well. So when I got into this industry, I didn't know I was going into functional medicine. I actually first was trained to work with fecal transplants. So I was over in Europe. I studied in Europe and worked in Europe for a while. And then we had a clinic here in Canada where that was our primary offering for about 2 years because, well, we thought that Canada would follow suit as to what was happening in Europe, where it's becoming more normalized and part of the medical system there. So we had brought it here thinking, okay, well, we're on the forefront of things and Canada will follow suit. That is not quite what ended up happening. So we did close, but over those years, we did accumulate quite a bit of data, and it was amazing to see how the different conditions did or didn't respond. What I did learn through that time is that it still can be quite unpredictable. So the way that the microbes colonize from the transplants is still dependent on what the recipient is eating, what their environment is like, what their stress levels are like. So that can all impact the way that the new microbes colonize. And what we were doing with clients is we would try to optimize their diet to promote colonization of the microbes that we wanted to colonize. So say someone was deficient in bifidobacteria, or they were deficient in butyrate producers, or we knew that they had a health condition that was associated with a certain signature, we would give them instructions to consume a certain type of diet with specific foods or lower levels of other foods in order to encourage colonization of the microbes that we wanted to colonize, and then discourage colonization by other microbes.
Super interesting. And it's funny sometimes with science, it's one step forward, one step back with the regulation, and sometimes for the right reason, and sometimes it makes us wonder what the stop is, especially when it comes to people's health and compared to other procedures. Again, we're not going to get into politics, but it's just too bad that sometimes, safety versus politics versus, it's a complex situation. But at the end of the day, when it impacts somebody's health, I think we should be doing anything that we can to help the person. You talked again about butyrate and short chain fatty acid. Are you a fan of giving supplementation of butyrate, either in form of oil or capsule? Is that something that you suggest with patients that are not producing enough, or you try to go more at the source or at the root of the reason why they're not producing enough?
I always start with trying to grow the microbes that are going to produce butyrate for the person, because once you've got them grown, then that butyrate production continues for hopefully a long time after that. So it's a lot easier and cheaper for the person than having to supplement butyrate all of the time. So that's the preferred route. However, I do have clients where they may not tolerate the foods that are going to promote butyrate production, or I don't know, there's a few reasons that there could be, but we might use butyrate supplementation in someone with colitis, for example, as that can respond positively to butyrate, and maybe even recommend butyrate enemas in someone with colitis because it's so anti-inflammatory and soothing and can help end a flare. But yeah, definitely I try to start with food wherever possible.
Whenever possible. And you're bringing up another point, and I guess that could be a question some people have. What's your take on doing regular enemas for your gut health? Is that something that you recommend to your clients, or even people that just want to do it more from a health prevention kind of thing?
Yeah, I think if you are using it for something specific and you're using it for a specific duration of time, there's not going to be really any harm. When I've looked at the research on even looking at the research on colonics, which are stronger than enemas, what they found was if it was just a regular colonic washout and it was done every day for weeks at a time, there was actually not very much of an impact on the microbiome. I expected to see more maybe loss of microbial species, but there really wasn't, which was good to see. But typically people are doing other things with their enemas. They might be doing coffee enemas or something along those lines, which is going to modulate the microbiome in different ways. And that could be positive for one person and it could be negative for the next person. So I would say it depends on how the person responds, but you wouldn't necessarily want to do enemas every day because you can lose the strength of your muscles down there and actually lose the capacity to go to the bathroom on your own. So I've actually worked with a couple bodybuilders who were doing enemas every day while they were in competitions to try to look cut. And they ended up losing the strength of those muscles. And so we were working with them to try to help them retrain the muscles.
Yeah. And the coffee, if I'm mistaking, is obviously for the microbiome, but I think it also stimulates the release of bile in the gallbladder, right? Like it's one of other benefits. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're following a specific detox plan where it's outlined for you to do maybe 3 coffee enemas a week for this length of time, I think that's reasonable, but I wouldn't do it every day for ever and ever.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. So we're going to start wrapping up shortly, but I'd like for you to tell us a little bit more how you work with some of your clients. I know we can't, go into specific, but when someone comes to see you, tell us your process with the client and how you're guiding them, because I think some people listening might be thinking, oh my goodness, I need to connect with someone like Kristina or potentially yourself. And what's your process to help people?
Right. So at the start, we have a baseline set of tests that we look at. And so we're looking at blood work, which is going to tell us more about the nutrients that are or aren't being absorbed, about potential low stomach acid, things like that, about their liver and kidney function. So are they capable of going through any sort of detox? We're looking at markers for methylation, which is more on the detox side of things. And we're looking at their immune function and their level of inflammation. So that's kind of like the baseline blood work that we do. And then, of course, I'm using stool testing to look at their microbiome. And I am working with breath testing as well to assess whether they have SIBO or some form of carbohydrate intolerance. The breath testing has gotten a lot better over the last couple of years as well, just as a little segue, but we're moving away from like shipping of the breath test samples to clinics and moving more towards home testing with the breath tests as well, and immediate results, which is great because we were getting false negatives before because of the transport of the gases. So anyways, that's a bit of a tangent.
But on that, I'll go on that tangent. I was in New York City at the International Health Symposium, and at the trade show, there was a few companies that were selling exactly what you said, at home testing for SIBO. And I went, wow, so the technology is truly improving and making it more accessible for people.
Yeah, definitely. So usually between the blood work, the stool test, and the breath testing, that gets us started. And we've got a pretty good idea of where we need to go with the person. And I customize everything for every person. So no person's microbiome is the same as the next person. It doesn't matter if you have the same diagnosis as the person beside you. You're still going to have a different microbiome and potentially different underlying imbalances that need to be worked on. And so the protocols are all customized per person. And then there are a few things that everyone works through no matter what, because we know, for example, the nervous system plays a huge role in how the gut is functioning. And so we're going to cover nervous system modulation. We're going to cover some of the things that we talked about today, like looking at the transit time, doing the stomach acid test, learning how to support stomach acid if that's low, or learning how to support the gallbladder and bile production if that's low, et cetera, et cetera. And the general scheme of things is, okay, we'll do the testing, we'll find out that here's the thing that's wrong, so let's reduce that. And then once that's reduced, then you move into, okay, let's start working on balancing out the microbiome, growing back what's missing. Sometimes it's hard to grow back what's missing right away if there's still overgrowth of problematic microbes, because they can potentially steal the food or the things that you're trying to use to modulate the beneficial microbes. So the general scheme is, okay, reduce the problem microbes and then go into restoring the beneficial microbes and working on leaky gut, et cetera, et cetera. And we tend to work with peptides as well. So that's another sort of cutting edge health subject that's been really amazing for some of our clients, especially those experiencing more leaky gut and more of the cognitive decline as well.
Which one are your favorite, if I may ask, when it comes to, do you have peptides that you prefer?
Yeah, so KPV has been really good. There's some research coming out and still ongoing clinical trials where they're looking at KPV for IBD and for leaky gut. It's also a good mast cell stabilizer, and it's antifungal, and it's relevant if someone has a history of mold. The BPC 157 is good too, although we wait and we bring that in at the very end just because it's more on the immune calming side of things, and you don't necessarily want to calm the immune system at the very beginning of a protocol when you're trying to get rid of something problematic. In terms of brain health, we are looking at things like cerebrolysin. We're looking at, well, the BPC 157 is relevant for brain health as well, and TB 500.
Yeah, and for people that don't really know what peptides are, so peptides have gained popularity in recent years, but they've been around for quite some time, and they are, small proteins, amino acid, either a sequence or 2 or 3 or 4. Some of them are oral. I know I personally have done the BCP 157 myself. So this one is oral. There's some that are injectable. So we're not saying to people to go and start injecting yourself with all of this, but just know that there's another aspect of science, another aspect of therapy that is out there that may not be as mainstream and may not be suggested by your regular practitioner, but there are a lot of practitioners, especially in the US, who will specialize in peptide, like the A4M, the anti-aging conference that I go every year. There's a whole section on peptide. They even have courses that are specific on that. So it's a growing area. Again, rules, regulation. I think it's obviously we want things to be safe, so there's more that needs to be done. But this is something, if people have never heard of them, you can start reading a little bit more about it and do your homework, trying to find a practitioner that can help you. So thank you for all of this. Did you want to add something, Kristina?
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, if you are reading up on peptides and you are someone who has a health condition, you'll want to look for a resource, an author, or someone who has experience working with health conditions, because there's a lot of information coming from the bodybuilding world, which isn't going to be very helpful for someone with a health condition and could potentially be dangerous.
Yeah, good point. So a trained practitioner, a functional medicine practitioner, for sure. So thank you so much, Kristina. I mean, this was so great, and I think you deliver the information for everyone to understand. We probably understand how complex it is and how little we know overall, but again, it's starting to understand it better ourselves, because you're constantly learning. I'm constantly learning about new tests, learning about how certain diets affect the microbiome. And like you said, certain health condition can be helped in other ways. So for people to contact you, Kristina, at your website, I believe you do some virtual consultation as well. So if you don't mind letting the viewer know your website, please.
Yeah, the website is www.mindmoodmicrobes.ca. And then our clinic website is www.viiv.ca.
Perfect. So again, if you need help, and hopefully tonight the show really enlightened you on what's out there and all the tests that you may not have even heard of, but hopefully this is giving you hope. It is giving you the feeling that and the resources to go out there and get the information. So again, Kristina, thank you so much for your time. This was, I'm sure, valuable for many of our viewers. So this was Dr. Nathalie Beauchamp with Hack Your Health with Dr. Nat. I hope you enjoyed the show and are going to take steps with the tips that Kristina gave us tonight to better your microbiome. Until next time.
Welcome to Dr. Nathalie's 7-Day Hack Your Health Challenge. Transform your fitness level with 7 quick, do them from anywhere workouts. Look and feel great. Nutrition. Master the art of optimizing your diet and maximizing nutrient intake with daily nutrition challenges. Biohacking. Unlock exclusive content to tap into your body's innate wisdom. Take on challenges to optimize your mindset and physiology. Ready to transform your health? Visit www.drnat.life to join Dr. Nathalie's 7-day Hack Your Health Challenge. Your journey begins now.
This has been Hack Your Health with Dr. Nat. Tune in each week and uncover simple yet powerful strategies and actionable steps to elevate your health and wellness.